The Honourable Pierre Yang.
President, thank you for the opportunity. On previous occasions in March and May 2023, I talked about place names bearing the word Chinaman in Canada, New Zealand, and United States, and in a number of East Coast states in Australia. I also talk about the courageous pursuit by Roger Ma Pui in Canada and his colleagues to change the name of Chinaman Peak to Harling Peak in Alberta, Canada. I also talked about the Colorado community, Chaffee County, which changed the name of a gulch from Chinaman's Gulch to Yanxing Gulch. These are encouraging stories which demonstrated the social progress and community sentiment towards a more inclusive and respectful community. Today, I would like to talk about place names in Western Australia. As I have a lot of information to go through, I plan to conclude my remarks in a second member statement in due course. But to start the conversation about Western Australia, just to recap, President, the word Chinaman is a racist term. It is derogatory and contemptuous in nature. It is on par with the N-word. In 21st century multicultural Australia and multicultural Western Australia, this word is no longer acceptable, and that's why we don't hear this word often. Well, this is until you look at the Western Australian map. President, there are 26 places in Western Australia bearing the word Chinaman in their names. And they are Chinaman Bridge and Chinaman Well in the Shire of York, Chinaman Clay Pan, Chinaman Pool, and 2 Chinaman Wells in the Shire of Ashburton, Chinaman Creek, Chinaman Springs, Chinaman Well in the Shire of East Pilbara, Chinaman Gully and Chinaman Gully Road in the Shire of Mundaring, Chinaman Road in the Shire of Serpentine Jarradale, Chinaman Rock Well, Chinaman Well in the Shire of Yagoo, Chinaman Well in the Shire of Dawalinu, Chinaman Well in the city of Karratha, Chinaman Well in the Shire of Menzies, and Chinaman Well in the Shire of Leonara, Chinaman's Beach, Chinaman's Drive, and Chinaman's Rock in the Shire of Northampton, Chinaman's Garden and Chinaman's Gardens in the Shire of House Creek, Chinaman's Pool Nature Reserve in the Shire of Carnarvon, and Chinaman's Well in the Shire of Broome. President, as discussed on previous occasions, place names can reveal much about a region's historical, geographical, social and linguistic background, and they also offer insights into beliefs and value systems of the name givers, as well as the political and social circumstances at the time of naming. The first person of Chinese cultural heritage, Mr. Moon Cho, came to Western Australia in 1829, shortly after the proclamation of the Swan River Colony. Moon was married to Mary Ann Thorpe in 1847 in Fremantle, and they had 6 children together, and their descendants are still living in Western Australia today. In WA, Moon became a well-known shipbuilder and carpenter who contributed significantly to the early Fremantle and built houses, shops, warehouses, and the like. He was unfortunately struck down in the 1870s by a mail cart in Fremantle, and this tragic accident prompted the authorities to impose speed limit and night lights on the streets of Fremantle. In fact, there were very few people of Chinese cultural heritage came to Western Australia or the Swan River Colony until the late 1840s, when the colonial government began to organize indentured laborers to come to Western Australia in response to the chronic labor shortage in the agricultural and pastoral sectors. Indentured labor is a form of contract labor, which requires the person providing the labor to surrender the freedom to quit his job for an agreed period of time. And though historically deception, coercion, and kidnapping were frequently used to obtain such labor, and thus contractual terms often reflecting the disadvantageous position of the laborer. And indentured labor is called coolies, or coolie in Chinese, which literally means bitter strength or hard labor. Throughout Western Australia's colonial era, the authority on a number of occasions spent government funding to arrange Chinese laborers to come to Western Australia, primarily through Singapore. Acting Governor Lieutenant Colonel Frederick Irwin did that in 1847 and 1848. His words to the Legislative Council were, "I have every reason to believe that a supply of Chinese may be procured, a very valuable class of laborers, being an athletic race of sober and industrious and persevering habits, and satisfied with moderate remuneration for their services." Very flattering words compared to many of the words said in the decades after. And President, a couple of decades later, the Legislative Council authorized the governor to spend public money to bring Chinese workers on 3 separate other occasions in 1874, 1878, and 1879 for up to £1,000, £4,500, and £2,000 respectively. Nonetheless, opposition to this policy and the anti-Chinese sentiment were always there in the community, and indeed it grew stronger over time. In the late 1840s, Western Australia's weekly newspaper, The Inquirer, published a number of opinion pieces questioning this policy. For instance, a piece published on Wednesday, the 26th of May, 1847, exclaimed that, "As for the proposed importation of Chinese, we have received advices from York stating that the unanimous opinion there that they were perfectly useless for the hard work of the agriculturist there, and that they, in fact, that their pigtails would be of as much service." And again, 3 decades later, the member for York, Joseph Munger, remarked during the debate in 1879, said that the 3 coolies he knew in his district were perfectly useless and almost useless and had to be returned to Perth at public expense. The member for Vass, Thomas Carey, declared that he would oppose any further importation of Chinese coolies as there existed a strong public feeling against their introduction in the district where they were not required. The member for Perth, Stephen Henry Parker, also echoed the same sentiment and claimed that these coolies were only fitted for light employment and were little or no use, where downright hard work had to be performed, and he would oppose the continued introduction of Chinese coolies. President, perhaps Mr. Parker didn't know that some 10,000 to 15,000 Chinese workers went to the United States to assist the building of the Central Pacific Railroad in the 1860s, and I would think building railways wasn't exactly light employment, as it can get a little heavy, especially when there was no mechanical machineries at the time. President, as I said at the very beginning, I have a lot of information to go through, and I wish to continue my remarks on another opportunity at a later date.